Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 15 of my Whispers of the Old Gods card review. Blizzard just dumped about 70 plus cards on their Facebook page earlier today, so we've got a lot of cards to review. I'm not going to get to all of them in this video. I'm going to try to do about 10 cards per video, but move through them pretty quickly so that we can get all these cards reviewed before Whispers of the Old Gods is released here in the very near future. So let's jump right into card number 1, the Aberrant Berserker. This is a neutral minion at 4 mana. It has 3/5 in stats with an rage effect of +2 attack. So when it comes to this minion, I think it's fine. It's basically a little worse than something like a vanilla Chillwind Yeti, but it has a slight upside. So if this trades into a minion, it gains 5 attack. The thing about this card is that it just doesn't really do anything. It's not a solid body. It's not a consistent body. The effect, while cool, seems very hard to actually pull off. And even when you do pull it off, you really don't get anything fantastic out of it. So in almost every case, I'd rather just run a Chillwind Yeti than run the Aberrant Berserker. Simply because, you know, on average, this card is a 4 attack minion. It's either 3 or 5. But sometimes it's worse, right? So this just feels like a kind of an extra card Blizzard tossed in just to give you more mid-range neutral minions to play with. Perhaps it has some synergies in Warrior, but not that good overall, and really just kind of a boring, weak card in my mind. Up next is the new Druid card, Addled Grizzly. This one's a 3-mana minion. Has 2/2 in stats, and an effect after you summon a minion, give it +1/+1. So this is kind of like a Hobgoblin for Druids, but no condition on the buff, and the buff, of course, is a little bit weaker. But still kind of the same idea or format as a Hobgoblin. And it's a beast. So there are some beast synergies here that might be explored with this card, and there are a number of other beast druid cards that were added, so and some neutral beasts. So I wonder if Addled Grizzly isn't another card that could kind of build the foundation for a beast druid. But just at a raw level, this one also feels a little weak to me, simply because 2 health for 3 mana is pretty weak. It dies to so many things, including a number of 1-drops. So it's going to be pretty difficult to get this out on the board on turn 3 and then utilize it in future turns, which typically means you're going to have to play it the same turn that you play the other minions you want to buff. So in other words, you know, after turn 5, 6, 7, that's when this card really starts to be good. When you can play specific minions with it if you want to play good minions. But also note that the words do say after you summon a minion, not just play a minion. So that's one important distinction from Hobgoblin this card has. And it does, in fact, make it substantially better because Druid has gotten a number of cards in this expansion and past cards as well that summon multiple token minions. Like Living Root summons 2 Treants, for instance. There's a number of cards that summon Wisps. So when you start to combine those with Addled Grizzly, suddenly things make a little bit more sense. So for instance, for 4 mana, you can play Addled Grizzly and Living Roots, and you've got 3 2/2s on the board, one of which is buffed, which is a pretty solid 4 mana, 6/6 total stats and value across 3 bodies. So it's not the best card ever, but in maybe like an egg-style, aggressive, hyper board presence, token-style druid deck, who knows? Perhaps Addled Grizzly could get you some pretty big turns and some pretty sticky boards. But I don't know that it's better than the buffs that Druid has, which affect minions which were already played, because those allow you to gain the attack value on minions that are already activated and attack more quickly with the buffs, whereas this one, it takes some setup and some time to play into effect. So Addled Grizzly, probably a little too slow and a little too weak, but I would like to see some decks designed to use this because I could very well be wrong. It has a powerful effect, so the potential's there. Moving on to a Paladin spell at 2 mana called A Light in the Darkness. Some pretty cool artwork, some dudes chasing down some tentacles. This is a Discover spell. Discover a minion and give it +1/+1. So I'm glad that the Discover mechanic is coming back in Whispers of the Old Gods. It's a pretty great mechanic because it's random, but it's controlled randomness, which is the best kind. It allows skill to really shine. And this is a neat little buff, right? Not only is this kind of a card cycle where you can find stuff that you might need at any given moment, or specifically a minion that you might need at any given moment, but it's also a little buff, so you get an extra 1/1 in stats. So you can kind of think of this almost like card draw, sort of a buffing card. It's just jack of all trades type card, and in a way it's designed like Unstable Portal, right? Unstable Portal for 2 mana, you get a minion card and its cost is reduced. It's a little worse than Unstable Portal. You get a minion card, its cost isn't reduced, but it's got a 1/1 buff. I would prefer Unstable Portal in every instance, but the similar kind of mechanic, you're getting a benefit as you draw that card. So I like cards like this. I don't know, that said, which kind of Paladin deck it's going to fit into necessarily. Aggressive Paladins probably won't like it simply because it takes time to get the minion and to play the minion. It takes mana. So I don't think it'll be good there, but perhaps slower mid-range or control style Paladins could use this one. I don't think it's going to shake up anything major, but it's got some gas. It can do some work and move. Moving on to the most hilarious minion ever. This is the Amgam Rager. You'll note the word Amgam, if you spell it backwards, spells magma. So this is literally a backwards Magma Rager. Same cost. The artwork is very familiar to the Magma Rager card, and the effects, or the stats, excuse me, are just flipped. Instead of being a 5/1, this is a 3 mana 1/5. So totally just the reverse card. It's been corrupted in some way. So that's hilarious. As far as how good this card is, it's a 1-attack minion, right, which almost never works. There have been very, very few 1-attack minions ever played successfully in any metagame. But that said, at 3 mana, who knows? In buffing style decks, with taunt-giving minions next to it, with stat-swapping effects like in Priest, there's potentially some legs under Amgam Rager. I don't think it's going to be played. I don't think it's very good, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it show up in a deck here and there and make a little bit of noise. But a fun, basic card, so happy to have it in the set. Moving on to the Mage legendary card. This is Anomalus. He is an 8 mana, 8/6, and it has a crazy death rattle. Deal 8 damage to all minions. So that would be the enemy minions and your own minions. So this card is interesting. It's got a design mechanic that we've never really seen before, in that it's a death rattle that hyper punishes the opponent's board. We have seen that a little bit with the, I'm blanking on his name, the dragon that when he dies deals 3 damage to all minions. So it's kind of similar to that dragon, but it does 8 damage. So it's practically a board clear for a vast, vast majority of minions. So in other words, in many ways, it's kind of an anti-taunt card. So when you play Anomalus, your opponent may not want to kill it because they're afraid they'll kill their own board if they do. So when you're behind and you play Anomalus, there's a good chance your opponent will just leave it there if they don't have a silence effect, because otherwise they're going to be hurting themselves pretty badly. Anomalus is probably not a card you want to play when you're ahead, because you can give your opponent an easy board clear, perhaps, at 6 health. But when playing from behind, which Mage is good at with things like Ice Block and Ice Barrier, they can kind of buy time and play from behind as they find resources to win the game. That's kind of an intriguing design. It's going to stay alive because they don't want to kill it sometimes, which means you get to attack for 8 to the face while throwing a couple fireballs too, so you could maybe set up like a 22 damage Anomalus combo or more with Frostbolt, of course. So, or if they leave it there, you can make trades too effectively with an 8-attack minion. So really interesting design space and really interesting effect. I don't know, all that said, what kind of deck this fits into. I don't think it's a Freeze Mage minion, it's just too much mana. But some late game control style or Reno style Mage decks could work pretty well with Anomalus. So I'm excited to see this card in action. I really like this design. It's one of the more clever mechanics that Hearthstone has offered just yet. Let's move on. Big Wisp, since it's in this Facebook album, is just one of the options you get when you play the Wisps of the Old Gods card from Druid. So we don't need to look at this one. This is not a collectible card. So up next is the Bilefin Tidehunter, a 2-mana Murloc that's a 2/1 body and has the battle cry, summon a 1/1 ooze with taunt. So this looks pretty familiar if you're at all familiar with classic Murloc cards. But instead of just being a Murloc Tidehunter, this one's a Bilefin, and the ooze that it summons has taunt. So you might say, well, that sounds objectively better than the other very, very similar card from the classic set. It's not necessarily, because the ooze it's summoning is not a Murloc. So you're losing a little bit of Murloc synergy with this card in gaining the taunt in its place, which can still be good in Murloc decks, right? Because if that 1/1 taunt is just enough to protect your Murloc War Leader, that's super high value. But you're also getting a weaker minion if you have a Murloc War Leader on board. So a trade-off, but still a really good card that loads up the board. I could see this even played in a Zoo-style deck that has nothing to do with Murlocs, just because it gives you a taunt that can be annoying. It gets you 2 minions for 2 mana, and a decent bundle of stats as well, because it's a total of 3/2 of stats. So I like this card. Great design. It's a nice balance of very similar Murloc cards as well. So crazy cool artwork too. I mean, the Whispers of the Old Gods art is great all around, but Bilefin looks fantastic. Moving on to the Blackwater Pirate. Another neutral minion, this time at 4 mana. It is a pirate, of course, as the name would suggest. Has 2/5 in stats, and your weapons cost 2 less. That's pretty cool, actually. I really like the design of this card. A 2 cost reduction is a huge tempo advantage, right? When you think about other things that give you 2 free mana, basically, they're very powerful cards. Innervate, for instance, of course. So pirate decks just got a lot better, I feel like, because of this card. So the potential for pirate decks just jumped through the roof when you can play 2 of these, because pirates already buff weapons in so many different ways. And this gives you a pretty solid body that trades effectively into early game boards, and a cost reduction, so you can play this and a Fiery War Axe on the same turn. That's crazy. If you Fiery War Axe on turn 2, burn through it by turn 3, play this on turn 4, you get another Fiery War Axe. So I really like this card as a tempo gain in Pirates, because it just lets you get more out more quickly, which is important when you're playing with a weapon class. You can't last forever necessarily. So you get the weapons out faster. You can also save mana for buffs to those weapons or future pirates for synergies. 2 attack, of course, isn't great, but it's still enough to trade early and help your weapon kill stuff. So with a Fiery War Axe, for instance, this could still kill something with 5 health. And since this has 5 health, it also is somewhat likely to survive. And when it has a great effect, you hope that it survives. If this survived 3 turns and you got the cost reduction twice on weapons, that would be unbelievable. It's unlikely, but it would be unbelievably powerful. So I think it's a cool card, fundamental to pirate decks perhaps in the future. And a neat design. I think pirates finally might be good. Moving on to a rogue card called the Bladed Cultist. It's a 1 mana, 1/2 minion with a combo effect, gain +1/+1. So this is interesting. So with the combo, of course, this becomes a 2/3 for 1 mana, which with cards like Zombie Chow has definitely been the dream in the past. You love getting a 2/3 out on turn 1 just because it trades so efficiently into probably their 1-drop and their 2-drop, and just get some damage and some bodies out on the board early. And we have seen some signs that Rogue is going to be able to play the minion game and the board presence game. So in those minion-style Rogue decks that probably will be coming up with Whispers of the Old Gods, I could see this as a great asset to have, because essentially, unlike turns 2 or 3 or 4, where you're able to combo this out pretty easily, it's a great way to add just an extra little 2/3 body with no downside. So, you know, even on turn 10, if you play this, a 2/3 is nothing to scoff at in the late game. Plus, with cards like Backstab on turn 1, there are a lot of ways to get this as a 2/3. You can coin it out to get a 2/3. It may not be worth the coin. But if they play a minion, you can Backstab and play this. That's amazing on turn 1. But on turn 2, you know, you could coin, play 2 of these on turn 2. That would be fantastic to have 2/3s. So I like powerful, low-cost cards, particularly powerful 1-drops. And this has all the potential to be exactly that. So I think it's a good card with a balanced design and fits Rogue really nicely. I'm excited to see this one in action. Up next is actually another Rogue minion, but on the total opposite end of the scale. This one's 9 mana. It's the Blade of Cthun. And as you might expect, it is a Cthun synergy card. It only has 4/4 in stats, despite being 9 mana. But the battle cry is nuts, just absolutely absurdly cool. You destroy a minion, so it's just straight up hard removal. It's Assassinate baked into this minion. And Assassinate, of course, is a 5 mana card. So that means you're paying about 4 mana for both the body of this card and the second half of its effect, which is add that destroyed minion's attack and health to Cthun. So you're getting a 4/4 for 4 plus potentially a huge buff to your Cthun. And of course, a Cthun with lots of attack is going to be very good when you finally play it, because every attack you add increases its battle cry that does damage to the enemy's board. So if you kill like a Ragnaros with your Blade of Cthun, you're going to get an 8 mana tempo swing from that rag kill. So that's super value. You're going to get a 4/4 body on the board, and you can add 8 attack to your Cthun. So when your Cthun comes out, he's going to do basically an Avenging Wrath to the opponent's board. So you're getting an Assassinate, a 4/4 body, an Avenging Wrath, and a giant buff to Cthun. If all those things hit, you can see how quickly this card becomes insanely valuable. All that said, it is 9 mana. It's a little bit slow, so you're going to have the right kind of deck, and Cthun decks will almost certainly be very slow decks that try to get into the late game. So I think that's actually fine, just because this does bake in hard removal, which means it's both reactive and offers some board initiative as well. So I like this card a lot. It's a pretty fun design, and Rogue Cthun might be a very serious thing, so I can't wait to play this. Up next is going to be my last card for this particular review. It is a warrior card called Bloodhoof Brave. It's got 4 mana cost, it's got 6 health, and it's got 2 attack, and it is a taunt minion as well. So it's a 2/6 taunt by default, which is actually pretty solid for 4 mana, I think, by the way. But it also has an enrage effect of +3 attack. So a pretty interesting minion in my mind. At a 2/6 stat allocation on turn 4, I think Bloodhoof Brave is actually decent anyway, just because that will allow it to trade into any like 2-drops or 3-drops which are still on the board, which sometimes in control style warrior decks happens when you just have to armor up, or armor up, shield block, and you haven't addressed the board yet. So they might still have that Knife Juggler laying around. Bloodhoof Brave will trade into that effectively. And at 6 health, he's going to be somewhat hard for people to deal with on turn 4 as well. Certainly they can fireball him, but that's a decent trade. And if they don't have any sort of direct damage, they're going to have to trade their board in. And because of his enrage effect, they have to do it in the right order. In other words, you know, they don't want to send their Emperor Thaurissan into an enraged Bloodhoof Brave, so they'll have to attack Emperor Thaurissan first, and then they might have to attack something that would have died anyway to 2 attack second. So create a little bit of friction on their board, perhaps mess up their attack ordering and save yourself some health. Also, of course, you can enrage this minion yourself. So if you have some whirlwind effects in hand and you kind of get the decision, would you rather have a 5/5 with taunt, or would you rather have a 2/6 with taunt? And having the decision yourself is important, because you can make strategic decisions based on the board state and what you suspect your opponent is playing. So that adds actually another layer of depth and strategy to this card, and I think makes it better. So they have all 5 health stuff. You might want to enrage Bloodhoof on your own. If everything they have is low cost at 2 health, you don't need to enrage it. You can keep its health instead. So some neat flexibility, some neat decision making. A taunt, which is good without things like Sludge Belcher. I'm not saying this is a Sludge Belcher replacement, but I do think this is a stronger card than Singe and Shieldmaster just because of the flexibility and the increased health. So a neat addition to Warrior. It's also perhaps got some legs with Taunt Warrior decks, which we've really never seen. But with the number of new taunts that Whispers of the Old Gods is offering, and Warrior-specific taunts like this one that follow up on Curve for Fierce Monkey, Taunt Warrior might be a legitimate deck before too long. So Bloodhoof Brave, not the best card ever, but I think potentially a pretty good one. And that'll wrap it up for part 15, I believe, of the Whispers of the Old Gods card review. If you have any thoughts or comments on these cards, you know where to leave them. I'd certainly appreciate to hear what you have to say. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.